Because a lot of times people will give you a lot of pushback. That won't work. It's going to take too much time. It's going to cost a lot of money. I don't know why we're doing this. It ain't broke. Why are we fixing it? You will hear and experience sometimes an awful lot of pushback. And from my perspective, nothing can help me as a leader understand how to communicate and lead and manage through change, especially when there's some pushback happening. Nothing can help me navigate that more effectively than understanding what's really going on, uncovering that root cause. And the vast majority of time, the root cause of resentment or frustration or irritation or pushback with change boils down to one of these four things, or a combination of these things. The first is fear. This is a pretty easy one to understand. Fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear that they won't be able to keep up. Fear that they won't be able to adapt or understand. Fear that they may not be as valuable in their position because perhaps it's being automated. Fear that their job will not be as secure. Fear that their hours might change and they might have some ramifications with their child care schedule. Fear that they'll need to work with new people and they don't understand or know those people. Fear that they don't have the skills and that they won't be able to learn those new skills fast enough. Fear, I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. I have found that if I step back and just think for a moment about where's the fear coming from, or what could possibly be a source of fear, I am able to be much more empathetic as a leader during some of the difficult times of change. By the way, notice I said if I step back and ask myself what could possibly be, that means I'm going to be curious. Curiosity is one of your superpowers as a leader, and curiosity is the gateway to empathy. If I step back and I say to myself, and I don't have to ask people, I don't have to say, well, what's your fear? Just ask myself, what are they afraid of? A lot of times I'm going to be hit over the head really clearly, like, oh, that's what they're afraid of. Because if you are working with people that you know well, you might know some of their habits, you might know some of their personality styles. By the way, there are some people whose personalities, because they are so systematic and they are so detail-oriented and they have a system for everything and don't mess with their system, when change happens, they freak out because they got to come up with a new system. And the moment you ask yourself, why are they giving me so much pushback? What are they afraid of? Oh, they're afraid they're going to have to, come up with a new system. The answers sometimes to what people are afraid of are right in front of our faces if we simply take a moment and ask ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to be able to get rid of their fear. Just by understanding it, though, we can then help them be relentlessly positive themselves. The other thing that is a real big root cause is lack of control. People feel like they don't have any control. Like this change is happening and it's not something they initiated. It's not something that they had any say in creating. It's not something that they get to decide when and how. They have no control. And when people don't feel like they have some control, ooh-wee, they will tighten up on things that they feel they can control. I'll share that with you again. When people don't feel like they have any control in perhaps one area, they will tend to exert as much control in other areas as they possibly can. They'll tighten up the control in other areas, which often creates pushback and resistance and difficulty. So think about this. How do you give people control during change? Well, one of the things is, again, to ask them what the benefits might be. That creates that sense that they have at least some level of participation. Instead of you telling them, here's what's so good about the change, ask them, what do they think is so good about it? Sometimes you will have people who are wanting to be change champions. They want to be a positive voice for the change, but they're struggling because they don't feel like they have any control. Well, give them a formal role. Let them lead a discussion on some of the benefits. That can help create a change champion. Another thing that can be a cause of resistance is uncertainty. And the number one way to counter this is to communicate. Boy, if I were taking notes today, I would put on my start or my continue column, probably continue, but I would put it in capital letters and I would underline it and I would exclamation mark it. Communicate, 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 communicate. Keep people informed. Be transparent. There is such this weird phenomena that I see in a lot of organizations where it's all, oh, it's on a need-to-know basis. Really? I think everybody ought to know everything unless they shouldn't know. And by that I mean that it's illegal or inappropriate or it could really cause some problems. I think you ought to be transparent and then pull back instead of leaking information out. That is just a different approach. It's go for transparency, and if you have to pull back, that's okay, rather than just leaking little bits of information out. Because in the absence of good information, listen very carefully, please, because this is really powerful. In the absence of good information, people tend to make things up. Think about that for a moment. In the absence of good information, people tend to make things up. So if change sometimes creates a lot of gossip and a lot of misinformation, it's because people haven't been given the right information. Be transparent. Let's communicate. And then another driver or root cause of resistance is unmet needs. When people aren't getting their needs met. Maybe it's their need for information. Maybe it's their need for control. Maybe it's their need for some safety. There might be an unmet need that's going on. And if you can stop and ask yourself, okay, what need might be going unmet, especially if you have someone who is particularly resistant. Now, obviously, there are probably numerous root causes to resistance that we have not addressed during this discussion. One of the key things that you can do is to use that curiosity. If I were taking notes today, I would most assuredly write down on my start column this question. What are they afraid of? Because that will uncover some of the fear. You can also use this questioning technique to figure out some of the other root causes. But unleash curiosity.